Let's go to White House correspondent John Roberts, who is live on the North Lawn. Is your head spinning?
Melissa, we've seen a lot of strange things happen in Washington over the last almost 2.5 years. This was one of the strangest, but it kind of follows along what happened one of the last times that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer were here, when they had a meeting in the Situation Room about funding for the border wall. And the president said, "Are you going to give me my money for the wall?" And Nancy Pelosi said no. And so he said, "OK, we've got nothing to talk about." And he got up and he walked out. That was an ongoing dispute. The president had sat out in the Rose Garden after this meeting, which wrapped up after maybe 15 or 20 minutes, that he had hoped to do something on infrastructure. And a couple of weeks ago, it looked like they were on the right track to do it. But this morning, Nancy Pelosi came out of that Democratic caucus meeting where she's getting a lot of pressure to go down the road to impeachment, and said that she believes that the president had engaged in a cover-up. So sources familiar with the meeting say that the president walked in and said, "I wanted to do infrastructure. I think we were close to getting some sort of a deal, but all you want to do is investigate me. You accuse me of a cover-up, and unless you don't keep going down this road to investigation, we've got nothing else to talk about in terms of these other issues." And the president turned around, because he came in through into the cabinet room, which where all of this happened, from the outside office of the Oval Office. That goes Oval Office, then there's an office, and then the cabinet room. He walked back out through that door and left them all sitting there, which is much the same as what happened in the Situation Room meeting earlier this year. But the president is obviously fuming about the fact that the Democrats were coming over here for what the president thought was going to be a bipartisan meeting on infrastructure, dropped that bomb just before they came over, and expected everything to be okay, which to me indicates that they're either really trying to mess with him, or they don't understand
it to be okay. Anybody with half a brain knows that it wasn't going to be okay after you go to a microphone and you say into the camera, "The president is currently engaged in a cover-up." Harris, go ahead. I know you got a question.
It's all about 2020, and everybody's laying down markers.
Yeah, from our producer Chad Program on the Hill, he says a senior House Democrat sourced on what happened at the White House between the president and Democrat leaders, quote unquote, "nothing good." Nope. So let's figure out where we go from here, because there's some things that are on the docket. Not just infrastructure, lifting the debt limit, spending deal. There were maybe some hints, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell might have even suspected that they could get a spending deal done this week. Where do we go from here?
No, we're good, I think, to quote Chad Pergram and his source. I mean, I think, again, we're seeing the parameters of the 2020 campaign laid out here. And the president began it last week when he laid out his plans for merit-based immigration. That is clearly a campaign issue that he was laying out there, one that he wanted to get Republicans rallied around, because there's no way under the sun that any kind of legislation on that particular issue is going to get passed before the election. Now the president is laying out this idea that all Democrats want to do is investigate, and they want to try to relitigate the 2016 election. They want to try to take him out either through investigation or through impeachment, and he wants to get things done. That's why he said that there's the two tracks you can follow. Both begin with I. There's investigation or there's investment. The Democrats want to investigate. He wants to invest. The Democrats have got a powerful argument, too, though, that they believe that the president was engaged in a cover-up. The question here is, I think, Harris and Melissa, how far are the Democrats willing to push this? Do they just want to keep dangling this idea of impeachment out there to try to keep the president off his toes and fire up their base?
John, I have a thought.
Or will they actually jump off that cliff? Because as Republicans found in 1999, it's a cliff that's got some very pointy rocks at the bottom of it, and may not be the wisest thing for Democrats to do going into an election year.
Ask former Speaker Newt Gingrich. He'll give you an earful on the political riskiness.
Stealing that line about the pointy rocks.
Yeah. So just real quickly, when you ask that question about how far they'll go, I think we're getting an indication. Nancy Pelosi's under a lot of pressure, and now she's talking about at least listening to those people like Maxine Waters and others this morning on what impeachment could look like. David Cicilline of Rhode Island on his Twitter account, Impeachment 101, laying it all out. It's interesting. They may go farther than anybody had ever thought. My question is, for the president, what's next for him?
Yeah, I think he keeps on just laying down these markers. He knows that he's not going to get anything done now with the Democrats. And I mean, we've joked
that means
about,
America
for the
loses.
past, we've joked that for the past 2 years and 4 months, it's been infrastructure week, and then it doesn't happen. But I think the president really wanted to get a deal done on infrastructure. But this ticked him off to no end that Nancy Pelosi came out and said that this morning. But Chuck Schumer said this was pre-planned. I don't know if it was pre-planned. It was hastily planned. They printed up, I've written a lot of notes on it, but they printed up this and the cardboard panel that the president had below the podium very quickly. They called this out in an instant. I mean, they knew going into the meeting at 11 o'clock that this was going to happen, but I don't think they began the day knowing that this was going to happen.
Attorney General William Barr heading to El Salvador as the Trump administration looks to combat the notorious MS-13 gang. My next guest represents a district that has suffered at the hands of the notoriously brutal gang. Congressman Lee Zeldin on the House Foreign Affairs Committee joins us now. Congressman, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It is one of the most brutal gangs, one of the largest gangs on the planet. 8,000 to 10,000 members, one of the most violent gangs on Long Island. This is a problem for you and your district. 25 killings on Long Island between 2016 and 2018 alone. What can we do about this? How are we fighting this?
Since President Trump came into office, the Department of Justice, the administration, President Trump himself have had significantly greater focus on this issue, different levels of government working together. What we've seen over the course of these last couple of years with a big crackdown, taking out MS-13 leadership and others. It's not just the high-profile, brutal murders that make national news. It's the regular instances of drug trafficking and sex trafficking, the human trafficking that's taking place. It takes a very human toll on the victims. So fortunately, what we've seen with the heavier focus is a crackdown with the Eastern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office, with the DOJ. There's more to be done, and it really requires, to a certain extent, when you're talking about a transnational gang, it's a transnational effort, and a lot of the money flow goes between countries where the DEA, the FBI need any additional tools, changes in law. We in Congress need to be providing the administration with the maximum support possible to prevent any further loss of life and any other further victims.
We'll see how that all goes, and we'll hear more from William Barr in that big interview, of course, with Bill Hemmer soon. Congressman, if I could transition to another trend that you are identifying in the House of Representatives, and that is anti-Semitism and rhetoric and acts that you have identified as a growing trend in Congress. What are you planning to do about that?
Just yesterday, House Republicans filed what's called a discharge petition. If 218 members of the House of Representatives signs this discharge petition, we'll have a vote on anti-BDS legislation. BDS is the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement. Unfortunately, the founder of BDS was blatantly anti-Semitic with all sorts of horrible quotes to back that up. We have Jewish students on college campuses all across America being targeted with blatant anti-Semitism in the name of BDS. We need to send a strong statement as a body that we stand against all this anti-Semitism, all of the anti-Israel hate. Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East, and it's a relationship that we should be strengthening, not weakening. But we also, beyond making a statement, need to also do something about it. Pass legislation with teeth. So the House Republicans, we filed it yesterday. I would encourage any of my Democratic colleagues, many whom we know support the legislation itself, to sign this discharge petition to force a vote. The Senate has already passed this bill. And one other thing that I would point out is what we've seen over the course of this week is that Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Pelosi, is actually going in the wrong direction, where she's now attacking Republicans, calling on us to apologize to these people who are pushing it.
So specifically, you are talking about this instance with a recent member of Congress making comments about the Holocaust. Republicans called on Nancy Pelosi to condemn those remarks. She instead said that Republicans were twisting her words and that it was a smear campaign. Finally, your thoughts on that, and do you fear that you're further dividing Congress with this move?
I will tell you that, well, first off, we should be uniting Congress in the effort to strengthen our relationship with our greatest ally. We should be uniting Congress to stand unequivocally, forcefully in condemning anti-Semitism, whether it's in American politics, the halls of Congress, or college campuses. But what should be noted with that interview with my colleague Rashida Tlaib last Friday is that she was being asked about her support for a one-state solution. Her solution is one that removes Jews from power in their own country in Israel. And answering that.
And we heard a lot about that. And I know that you've been very active on this issue. We'll see where it all goes, Congressman. We appreciate your time this morning and we'd like to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.